we're speaking about. Hey guys, already we have 7. We just started. We just opened the live session. Hey guys, you can start pouring in here to the live session. Let's see, Mike. Okay, great. Attendees, we're gonna check what's the situation in the event. Great. People are starting to get tired. We've been speaking. I've been talking since 10 a.m. emceeing this first day. And today is easy because today we only have 1 session in every hour. Tomorrow we have 3 sessions every hour, parallel, and roundtables about, do you know Joe Bacon? For
yes,
sure, right?
Of course.
So we have a roundtable with Joe, or a fireside chat that's going to be a roundtable of discussions for open source communities, because he's the king of open source in many ways.
Yeah.
Did you hear about his leadership summit that was in October?
No. What did he do?
He did it's like, it was a brand that he started a while ago, but now IBM and GitHub and all these open people that try to push open source, pushed him to do another summit again. He had, I think, a 2-day summit. So it was on the 23rd until 24th or something of October. And it's something he's been doing for a while. So we had CMX in the beginning of October, them in the end of October, and now us. By the way, while we're talking tomorrow's like a vanilla webinar, vanilla forums, and community from being this niche that nobody understands or gets is becoming overwhelmed with events and conferences, which I think is a good thing.
It is. Community is becoming the thing.
It's becoming a thing. Do you know Guy Katzovich, right?
Yes.
So I'm trying to for a while. Do you listen to his podcast?
From time to time, yes. He's good. He's great.
He's really good. He's good, and he cultivated a whole group of podcasters to do his job. Today he still has the brand, but other people do the work. But I'm trying to talk about community, but every time, and I think me and Guy have a really good relationship and affection to each other, but every time I say the word community, it's like, what's community? It's just an invented word. There's nothing like community. There's no such position really, and stuff like that. So, so what we're gonna do tonight with Amir is not only prove that there is community, but community is not just alive, but it's kicking. And it's growing, and it was actually grown in many corporates for many years. I come from the accounting industry. I was only in management consulting in the accounting at KPMG, but we had the big 5. But you were already in 3 of the big 5 of the tech industry. You were in IBM, in Microsoft, and in Amazon, right?
I was not in IBM. I was in Microsoft, and then I was at Google, and then I was Slack, and then I was at Amazon.
Yeah, Slack isn't one of the big 5, but
that's true.
3. So yeah, for sure, Microsoft. And who brought you over to Silicon Valley and took you away from us?
Google.
Google, actually.
Yes, so I started. In Israel, I did the campus Tel Aviv, and created the community around campus Tel Aviv. And then Google wanted to launch that all around the world. So they made me an offer we couldn't refuse. And we just came back from New Zealand. So we were in Israel for only 3 years. We were in New Zealand before that. And we said, we don't want to move. And then we had to move again.
I don't believe it. Michal, do you hear it? Michal, comment if you hear this. Because do you know that Michal Seol is a Kiwi? Kind of a Kiwi. She was 10 years.
She's a Kiwi. Hey, that's awesome. Love to meet that.
Decade as a kid in New Zealand. We consider her a Kiwi like I'm an Aussie. I don't know if you know. My mom's from Australia. She's from Melbourne, born and raised.
That's awesome.
And I have the passport, so we're from the Pacific. And me and Michal have this bondage of people that are semi Kiwi, semi Aussie. I call myself an Australi.
Australi, I love it.
So that's it. And cool. What did you do in New Zealand?
One day we decided to take the road less traveled and just take our 1-year-old at the time and a 3-year-old and take the 30-something hour flight to the end of the world and find a job and live for 2 years on the other side. It was a great experience. I went back to engineering, so it was fun.
In which company did you work when you were in New Zealand?
It's called Datacom. It's one of the biggest system integrators there. I lived in Wellington, which is the capital of New Zealand. It's on the south end of the Northern Island. And my kids were Kiwis. They were used to say like things like, "Daddy, have a beer under my bed," and stuff like that. So I was always looking for the beer.
Bears. I have
Yes,
sex bears. Yeah.
exactly.
So yeah, oh my God, I love Kiwis. So I think it's the best place to because by the way, when we think about community, when I think of Kiwis, they're so hospitable and so trust. The speed within they have trust to foreigners, which I think is declining because what foreigners do sometimes, but is so overwhelming. And I think it's something that we Israelis slash Jews maybe have, especially to people from our local community. I think they have the camaraderie of humanity in general, and that's something that's really amazing. And by the way, before you came on 3 hours ago, we had a session with Yael from Startup Nation Central that they opened like a founder in New Zealand also. And it's funny to see the places with community adopting the ecosystem mindset and mind frame around the world.
That's so funny you mentioned that. You know, I wrote Finder.
It's not that funny. It's actually, I know that.
Okay, awesome.
But actually, I wasn't thinking of it when I mentioned Yael. I know you, and by the way, Omri. We spoke about Omri a second ago.
Omri Baumer. Yeah, he wrote it. I wrote the bugs. He fixed them. So that was that was our relationship.
So it's like a founder. You were like the founder with a vision and this, and then came the CTO and took out all the bugs.
Exactly. Exactly.
So that's amazing, and we're still enjoying it. Startup Nation Central is our main partner in this event, and without Startup Nation Central, I'll be honest, I don't know if I will do a third event. I was already tired from doing 2 global summits, and Michal was like, listen, let's do again. We have another grant. Let's go for it. And when Michal asked, I can't say no. And also, every time we do this, we have such an amazing impact and such amazing feedbacks. And also, we have the luck of getting amazing guests like you. So without any further ado,
thank you for having me.
Again, thank you for coming. I know how hard it is for you to find time. You have your own company. So you used to be in Microsoft. Can you tell us a bit about your milestones during your career and where you are today? And then we'll pick up from there and go back to the main points in your corporate life and talk about cultivating communities and corporates.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So just to close back the loop, yes, Finder was awesome. I wrote a very small part of it together with Omri Baumer and Ron Reiter. So I want to give credit to where credit's due. So what I do today, I'm an angel investor and a founder of a company called Reshuffle. After about 20 years of working in big corporate America. Worked for a few years in Microsoft. I only do one thing, which is developer communities and developer products. This is my expertise. So at Google, Microsoft, I was working with developers on Windows, on Windows Mobile, on SharePoint, on other developer technologies out of Verona, out of the Google Israel office. After that, I joined Google and created the Google Developer Relations team in Israel. Developer Relations are the people who interact with developers and create a community of developers around the company's product. So my responsibilities was to work with developers on Chrome and cloud and Android and AI and bots and all of that in order to create quality integrations and quality applications on top of Android, for example. So I worked with the top companies in Israel to build applications on Android. I also, as part of that, created the Google Launchpad program, which is the Google Startup program. What started as what my manager called as a bad idea that you should just explore during your 20% time. And then it blew up and became something quite successful. And we started having a campus and a lot of startups engaging with Google and creating a thriving community around it. And then Google offered me to do this around the world, to launch this globally. So 7 years ago, moved here to the Bay Area, to Palo Alto, and started working on a global program. At the end of my time at Google, I managed all of Google scalable developer programs. So Google developer groups Women in Technology, ISVs, Developer Experts Program, which was like the ambassador program, corporate ambassador program, and the Launchpad. Then I joined a small startup called Slack. We were 80 people at the time, and we had a community of 50 people at most, who really didn't know each other. And then the company was 80, and when I left Slack, the company was 2,000. And our community was 50, and when I left, the community was 250,000 developers who are using the API on an ongoing basis. So that was a crazy 2.5 years. Then Amazon reached out to me and asked me to be the VP of a platform, for developer platform, of a company they just acquired called Twitch. Twitch is a community platform for people who create streams, create their own TV channel, and create a community around usually streaming games. And my job was to work with a totally different community of developers who are game developers. So Riot and Blizzard and EA and Ubisoft are all the game developers that either you or your kids are using, were my community at the time. And that's it. A year and a half ago, I started doing, I left corporate America and started doing angel investment, mainly in Israeli founders, but also here in the Bay Area and US based, and doing Reshuffle. And Reshuffle is open source platform for integrations. We create a platform for you to connect all your system in your organizations, and create workflows from marketing automation to bug systems and so forth and so on.
Man, you say it like that, but it's like, it's such a story. And you talked about, I think, 12 communities, because there were like maybe 7 jobs, but in Google you were in charge of all the different communities there. And if we can go through, we were talking about before we went live, about creating buy-in. And also we were talking about ROI of a community. Can we go through again the example that you started? And I think the first community you cultivated was actually in Google, right? As you said, in the campus.
Yeah.
So let's start there. The bad idea that triggered and made you what I see one of the first leaders in the open community. Like, there were a lot of community managers in Microsoft I heard about, but they were all in marketing positions that were more customer success or event planners, and not exactly what we call community. But you did something a bit different, and I would love you. So let's talk about ROI and cultivation of the organization around it and make it blow up.
Yep. Yeah, that's a great question. I think community is considered a soft trait of an enterprise, and that's bad, because things that are soft usually fall when you shake the tree, and things that are soft are not really well connected to the core KPIs of the company. And if you don't tie things to the core KPIs of the company, if you don't get strong buy-in and make community core aspect of your business, then why do community? And a lot of companies are asking themselves that, right? So my first inclination is community is a tool. Community is a tool and a mission. And if you want to go on that mission, it could help you a lot. So if you look at things like Android, it was very, very clear to us that we needed a developer community, because we had a product called Android, a phone. And if you didn't have a developer community that created all these apps on the phone, then you couldn't, the phone won't be very useful. And you can see an example for that with Windows Mobile, right? Windows Mobile is a great operating system, but because there's no apps and there's no ecosystem, the phone is not really useful. If you see iOS is super useful because it has such a rich set of applications. So community for some tools and ecosystem for some tools is critical. Other example is Stripe and Twilio. Stripe and Twilio are basically a developer community. So the entire business is around the fact that developers use their product and create a community around them. So in some places it's hard to get buy-in. In some places it's easy to get buy-in, and it all connects to how easy can you tie in what the community does, what the community is for, with what is the bottom line of the company. How do you tie it into what the company cares about the most? Does that make sense?
Totally. Just about the companies and examples you gave, because maybe some people don't know.
Yeah. Okay. So for Android, it was the first. Let's take just Android. For the first year, the target was we want 1 million apps. Apple is on our head with like they have 1 million. They have so many apps in their marketplace. We want 1 million apps. Then the target was we want tablets. We want a lot of apps on the tablets. So go engage the community and talk to them about that. Then it was wearables. And then it was the last theme that we had was around creating the top quality apps, the apps that show in your front screen. So we really tied, just for Android, and then I can talk about Google and about Campus, we really tied the engagement around Android around the things the company care about the most. What are the things that the VP at the end of the road is measured on? And if you can tie the community outreach and community engagement to that through a circle of inspiring your community, in educating your community, enabling your community, and then extracting feedback and feeding it back to the product team. If you create this cycle of value, you can really tie your community into something that is super useful for your business and for your product.
So you were talking about it, and we talked about that's an inspiring goal, 1 million apps, right?
Yes.
And so when you tied it, and it was easy for you and very intuitive, you tied it to the product, right?
Yes.
So let's talk about your other initiatives like Google Campus.
Yeah. So Google Campus, we wanted to reach out to as many startups. We wanted to get to improve the startup ecosystem, because more startup ecosystem. Again, coming back to the targets. The targets was a lot of apps on Google, on Android, on Chrome, on cloud. That was the end goal. That's what we wanted to achieve. A lot of quality apps on these platforms. So how do you do a lot of quality apps? You educate developers. You engage with startups, because startups are, in Israel at least, the most common form of organization that creates these apps. And you help them help themselves, because you're only a one-person shop. And with there's other engineers in Google, and there's business development. Eyal Miller was amazingly a good friend and helped me a lot with Campus. And Professor Yossi Matias was there to like lead and do the mission. But at the end of the day, my job as a developer relations, I was the only person there. So I had to create a community for them to enable and help each other. So we created Campus as a way to engage with the community. We had space in a very expensive place, and space was missing. So we analyzed the market and saw what is actually missing. What was missing was a space. People wanted to meet, and there wasn't at the time. Now there's tons of places to meet before Corona, but like people didn't have a place to meet. People didn't have a lot of knowledge on how to design great apps. So we brought into that space people who could help the community build amazingly looking apps. And people didn't have a lot of devices. So we had a device library with all these Android that you could go and test your application. So we fostered the community in a way that really contributed to the way we wanted to build the community into the outcomes that we wanted to see.
And so the Campus was actually a second phase. From in the beginning, you said you built the community of the developer community before you opened Campus, right?
Yes. It was called the Google Developer Group. It is a movement that I managed only the Israeli part, but at the end managed the group that managed the entire thing. Google Developer Group is an example of a community around the world. It has today more than 750 meetups that meet every month to talk around the world. So 750 people organize meetups all around the world to talk about Google technology. There's hundreds of thousands of developers in all of these.
And how much do you estimate, if we're talking about KPIs, does today because today you have enough apps, I think, in Google Play and stuff like that, maybe. So
Yeah.
how much does Google invest in Google developer groups and GDG, and how much do you think what's their ROI that they measure today in GDG?
I would say between between $5 and $10 million in that community outreach, and it's basically the people who manage it. So there's a team of Googlers who manage the community. There's swag and branding that is created to it. There are events and organization program managers who manage programs around it, and there's branding and marketing that is invested into it. That would be the inputs. So between $5 and $10 million a year in total cost of ownership. In terms of outputs, it's amazing. I would say it's about tenfold. The main things that Google measures themselves on around the Google Developer Group is awareness. Whenever there's a new API, a new product, a new thing, everything is disseminated into the groups, and the groups educate developers all around the world. So when there's a version of Android, they go and meet up and talk about what's new in Android X.X and teach developers about the intricacies of that. When there's a new version of cloud feature, an AI API, it all goes through the Google developer community, and these people for free teach other developers and host events and take care of content. It's an amazing experience. Another way to measure the community is feedback. So the community actually finds bugs, submits problems, provides usability issues, does A/B testing. There's tons of things that the community provides to Google, and Google actually measures everything.
Amazing. If not Google, who would measure everything?
Exactly.
So, and it's interesting because we started with the outputs that we were looking for and measuring as 1 million apps. And now suddenly the measurements are totally marketing. And when I think about $10 million in marketing, it's not a lot of money for 750 chapters of raving fans.
That's true. That's very true. And it's marketing, it's awareness, but it's also proficiency. So you want quality applications. So it also contributes to the proficiency of these developers. It also creates a lot of not just for short-term, but long-term brand awareness. So people create content. People create videos on how-tos. People support others. So you reduce support costs. There's tons of other, not just marketing capabilities that are generated out of it.
And how do you think that other organizations not all the organizations invest in building a community and measuring their community KPIs? What's the real hardship to create that by in other organizations?
So I would say a community, I believe that everything is a tool. And you need to understand why are you using the tool and how to use it and what are the things that you're going to get it. If you want to comb your hair with a hammer, that's going to be very frustrating for you. So the key here is that a community is a tool that lets you achieve a few things. And you need to be very clear about, and it's also very clear, you need to be clear with the community about what you're doing. So for example, if it's a support community, people helping other people. In Slack, we had Slack developer group, and there were different channels. One of the channels most active was support, was developers asking for support from other developers. So now it's very clear what the community is doing there, and it's really easy to measure. A lot of companies don't really understand why they need communities. They don't understand what are the top things. Is it for sales funnel? Is it for branding? Is this for support? Is this for general awareness? Is it for... So define what you want the community to do. Then be very clear and transparent with the community about your intentions. And again, that's very important. Another thing that another mistake that I see a lot of companies do is try to build the community before they actually have a good product or service. A community is a celebration of success, not the path to that. So like when you have a good product, people will flock and love your product, and then you can harness those people and create a community. So it's an outcome. Sorry?
So I want to ask and challenge that. I think sometimes, and tell me what you think about when I just rephrase that sometimes a challenge is what gets a community together. Sometimes if we say, listen, we want to create this product and right now it's shit, but we want to create a great product, doesn't that also create community sometimes? You don't have to start from an amazing product. You can start with a challenge.
You can, if the challenge is generally, it's a good question. I don't know the answer for that 100%. I would assume that if we create a challenge to solve world hunger, then that will probably, a lot of people will join and help us. But if we can say, hey, I want to have a challenge to solve, I don't know, something boring that only I care about, but it's very useful for a few people, then it's going to be very hard to create a community around that. Corporate communities usually solve problems that are very interesting to the corporate. And if they don't have a successful product, it's going to be challenging for them to get a community to join them and make a successful product that will generate a lot of revenue for the corporate. So I guess I agree with you on the context of if the mission is something that everybody believes in. Again, coming back to Android, the mission for Android was amazing. Let's create an open source alternative for phone, and that was amazing. For Slack is like the mission was let's make people's life simpler, more pleasant, and more productive at work. And that was a great mission.
With Slack, you focused on the developer niche because when we talk about building a community, we want to have some kind, we call it like-minded people, we call it PLM, people like me. So that's the idea of growth. You want to say, okay, yeah, everybody can use Slack and it's making life simpler, but that's a very big thing. And if we have in Slack all kinds of people, it will be hard. But what happened with you guys, and I know it when I worked with the Sadna Le'eda Tziburi, how do you call it in English? The workshop for
open government information,
Exactly, and I used to be in their board. You know, everybody uses Slack. That was my first introduction to Slack, and now I get it because it was a developer thing. And when you start with a kind of PLM, people like me, it's easier to create a community because you already have so many common interests and common languages. Then if you just change the mission, it's hard to collaborate around that. But again, going back to cultivating buy-in. So in Slack, was it the cultivation of buy-in around being community, or was the community just a mistake?
No. Slack got to a realization that they need a developer community when they failed otherwise. So they said, okay, we're going to do Slack, and Slack is going to integrate into everything. And they started building these integrations. They integrated Slack into Jira, into Asana, into GitHub, into all these tools and services. And after 64 integrations, they gave up. They said, oh, there's so many people. The company was small at the time. They said, there's so many integrations that people want us to do. And those integrations are so complex. If we don't have a developer community, we will fail at this. We have to have an API and create a community in order to be successful with our mission to create a hub for everything in the business. So when I came, it was after they tried to build their own integrations into everything and said, no, we have to have a developer community that will help us do that. The only way to win this war is by becoming an ecosystem.
And by the way, when I think about it, you answered my next question. I was going to say, okay, so it sounds like saying you're going to market us isn't a good mission statement. And product and communities is usually around products. But here with Slack, sounds like the community was the marketing tool. Am I correct?
The community love was definitely a marketing tool. And it was also a sales tool. Because if you look at the big accounts that we tried to get into, You know who was the first person who installed Slack in big organizations?
Who?
The intern. So the kid who just finished college and he was a part of the community in his college using Slack, and now he goes to his first company and they don't have Slack, and he's like, "Why don't you use Slack?" And he started installing Slack everywhere and getting everyone to use Slack. So the intern that had a community in their own university has brought the product into the big company. And then everybody's starting to use Slack inside the company. And then one day, nobody uses Slack. You know why? Because security found out that everybody's using Slack. And they say, no, nobody uses Slack anymore. And about 24 hours later, they go and buy Slack because everybody tells security that they're going to leave the company if they don't use the product. So a community could be a great engine for sales, for product, for branding.
We were talking with Derek Anderson before, and I think it's about, he's talking about authenticity. And I want to connect it here that when you come and you hire a community professional and say, here, it's like marketing. Try to market this shitty product and tell everybody it's great. People aren't stupid.
No.
People. And I think community and marketing, that's, I don't like to put community and marketing in the same basket because community is something a bit different. But in that sense, if it's shit, you can't sell shit. And I think marketing, even marketing can sometimes swallow it. Community can't, because community is about authenticity. And
100%.
And I think, by the way, I think that's why company leaders should take in community, because community isn't just a tool to take things outside or create things outside. It's also a bullshit detector, and you should listen to your community. No, think about it. Product feedback is a good way to say it, but like it's a bullshit detector. Guys, don't, we know quality when we see it, and this is not quality.
100%. Yeah. When I hired people to work in my organization, I asked them, what is broken with my product? And if they couldn't tell me what's broken with my product, I couldn't hire them. Because if you don't have empathy and you're not a part of a community, you can't lead a community. You can't lead a conversation with a community member saying that. And I've been to companies that asked me to do that. So when somebody reported a bug, I used to say, no, this is how it's built, or I can't do anything about it. But like modern communities are all about, yes, it's slightly broken, but we're really working together to fix it.
And that's great. And then it's like the togetherness, the partnership, the accountability that everybody has together. And that's why I think, by the way, community is something that should drill down to all the organization, but you need to start in one. So you said you had a great experience about building a community around building products for the organization with the community of GDG that then was cultivated for a community that you were less part of, about the awareness and stuff like that. Or were you also related to?
When it was around awareness, when it was like the global, I was more like a manager of managers. So my team managed the developers. So when I looked at the Google developer groups when I was in Mountain View, my job was actually the reverse, to see how much should I fund and how much should we invest in the community. So my role was to look at the community aspect that we have and other programs that we had and see where should Google invest their money. So that's why I'm very passionate about tying a community to a KPI, because if you keep performance indicator, if you don't tie your community to actually something that is useful, then you should invest there. So honesty and directionality and transparency and empathy are the important words when you talk about community.
I totally agree with that. And I think that's something that every company is wanting in many ways, but are very afraid from many ways. And I think that's part of the threshold agreements that we have to add when you start community, that you're going to get that. But people that are ready for that are usually going to be the killer apps and the killer companies that we make through. So let's have a few questions from the audience. Doron, if you can raise your hand. We have also Piper, if you can raise your hand. And we had a great question from Shai and Michael, if you want. You have a hand signal just underneath your view. I don't know, Doron's maybe a bit shy. Um, okay, if you want to raise your hand, I come put you on stage, and I'll just go through the questions more or less. But so maybe you can tell us a bit about your company today. Where do you embed community? Now you don't need to buy in for everyone. You're the boss. Do you buy in community when you're doing reshuffle?
So yes, we are trying to get the community. We are a very early stage company, and we have only about our product has been in on the market for about 6 months. So our current need for the community is feedback. So what I do is I try to get as much feedback to see to get to a product market fit. So my KPI is how can I generate the most amount of feedback through signals from the community. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm also looking into a tactic that I used in Slack, which is to look into other communities and to reach out to those communities. So instead of pardon me, instead of investing in communities and community building myself, I do community outreach and go to other communities like the AWS community and say, hey, here's how you would use Reshuffle on AWS. Here's how we use Reshuffle on Google Cloud. And then what I get out of that is a lot of feedback, early stage feedback for my product to see if I've built it right.
By the way, we have a name for that. It's a new service that we started in ISL. We call it CR, Community Relations, because we say that some companies are too small to build their own community, or in the beginning, they need to just hang on and other communities. And by building a name for yourselves, when I started my business, I said, I don't need to teach everybody to be leaders. I need to teach people to be good members. You know, when you're a good member, in the end, you grow up into the ladder of participation. In the end, you ask to be a leader. Just grow from there. But you can do that, cultivate all your needs from doing good community relations and working with other communities. And we try to facilitate that for companies who don't know how to, because they used to, okay, let's pay them this amount of money and that's what we're willing. And no, for the community, money isn't enough, or, you know, and for you, it's not enough value. And you have to mitigate the real needs to the community and what the company can give. And for you, probably it's great when you join a community. It's like, I'm Amir Shevat. I have great insights for you guys about your product. And here, maybe you can give me some feedback from my product. And you have a great exchange of value and everybody's happy. But then slowly you cultivate them to your community. So by the way, where do you cultivate your future or upcoming community for Reshuffle? On what platform? How do you try to do it?
So right now I'm looking into growing a little bit of like a Twitter following in the community. We're looking into, sorry, I'm blanking on the name. Discourse is the tool that we've chosen for our developer community. We used Discord for a while. We didn't really like it. Now we're using Discourse. It looks like it creates a good conversation, which is what we need right now. So our mission is now not to do support or sales through the community, but more create feedback. So it helps us with building useful and productive conversations.
Great. And do you do like virtual meetups every once in a while? Do you try those things that are besides just having a following?
So right now we're not doing meetups. We're doing community content. So the way we want to seed the community is by creating a lot of content around different use cases. Mm-hmm. The way a use case driven community is very useful, I think. At Slack, we had like 10 use cases that we started with. We want developers to connect Slack into Salesforce and other systems. So there was a Salesforce community, and we want developers to do productivity hacks on Slack, and we want developers to do HR related things. So if you do a mission driven community, that really helps like solidify and direct your community. So I always call it like fun, belonging, and growth. Why is it fun to be a part of the community? Why do you feel belonging? What is the branding and what is that? And why is it good for you? What is the growth? What's in it for me to be a member of the community? So now I'm focusing on creating content that will build the growth part for my developers.
Listen, I just want to show you our slide because when I talk about building communities, it's something that we built that's called the utility model. And we talk about three types of utilities, like the rational utility, which is like the last one that you said about why it's good for me.
Yep.
Emotional community, which is sometimes belonging, support, emotional support, self-fulfillment, self-esteem,
Yep.
and also what we call the joker card, which is fun or
Yep.
emotional, just taking yourself out. And these are the three pillars that you look
That's
for.
awesome.
So
Exactly.
and in the end, all we do as community professionals today is just view, because communities are all around us all the time. The only difference that we do is stop and just look. Okay, this is what's happening here. Okay, this is what's happening there,
Yep.
and that's great. So we talked about Reshuffle. We talked about Slack. I love that. I'm going to adapt the idea of use cases, having very clear use cases. Like Slack was a use case for developers, and they tell me that you broke down to 10 sub use cases,
Yep.
and then what you do as a community, and that's what we call like hooks.
Yep.
When we work with companies, we do like, okay, think of a hook, and a hook is a use case in many ways. Okay, we're going to meet 1 week to find a job. Let's do 1 week to solve a product, and we
Yep.
create the hook. We for sure know Amir Shevat's book about hook.
Yeah, I love that book.
And that's what I use to do that. You call it, and I'm going to use it now. Case studies, use cases, and we do on every use case that they need, trigger, action, reward, and try to think how they stay invested in it and how they have building up, and the rewards are connected to the investment.
Exactly. And if you're very clear about it, if you're clear about the use case and your mission, if you have a theme, you say, hey, like Android, now it's all about tablets. And how are we going to help you? We're going to give you tablets. We're going to give you videos about how to build on tablets. This is the thing that is most important to us. If you're clear about your mission, your community is going to be very happy with you, because what they don't want is a sneaky corporate that tries to sell them on stuff and tells them, hey, we're all here for happy, shiny things. So being transparent and clear is super important.
So, in the end, it sounds very simple. To have a buy-in in our organization, you first of all have to have a clear KPI and decide about one KPI, one output that you know that it's going to happen, that's going to help the organization. And by the way, the great story about Slack, that it just won't work any other way. You tried other things. And I think the second point I want to take and recap from your talk is the story of GTG, that it gives you 10 folds. Investing in a community gives you an ROI that's crazy. And I think the biggest mistake, and we talk about it, that's why when I was at CMX in my first time and I saw the space model, blew my mind. You have to focus on one thing. You talked about, case studies. You have to focus on, yes, it can do marketing, it can do many things, but you have to choose one or two, or maximum, if you're a community-oriented company like Slack, use cases, very clear use cases, and go through that and say, okay, I'm going to do this for a while. And because it's a community, you need to have time to see that it works, and then have buy-in. You have to have a bad idea, as you said, have your manager let you do your bad idea for a year. We say that communities are like pregnancies. You need 9 months until they give birth, and you really see the value of
100%. It's definitely a trailing indicator, and you see the ROI of around 3 to 6 months later. You also need to have advocates, internal advocates, and have people who are passionate about this. This is a long-term investment that usually, if it pays out in a very big way.
Totally. And I think the biggest question that what you said before I recapped was about, so how does a corporate create a buy-in with the future members of the community? Because you're a corporate, you're shiny, you're Coca-Cola, sorry for brands of Coca-Cola and stuff like that. You're all about doing marketing and branding, but behind the story, it's all about, storytelling. In Hebrew, people don't know storytelling is used to be like a bad thing. Like, you're lying to me. What are you telling me stories? And storytelling became this thing, but still people, I think, if you're telling a story and not telling the truth,
you have to tell the truth, and you have to be authentic. So in the 4 months before we created Campus, I went and I sourced people from the community, and I told them my mission. I went to Omri Baumer and Ron Reiter and David Katz and all these like amazing community members. And I told them, hey, listen, I want to help Israeli startups be amazing and create amazing things on the Google technology. And I have this budget and I have this mission and I want you to help me create a community. And I saw an amazing turnaround. So people were really happy to contribute their time, to contribute their talents to help create a community. So creating a community is a community experience by itself. If you're trying to do it alone, you're probably gonna fail because you need to have a few people who are very passionate about the topics that you're trying to achieve, and that's the key. It takes a village to create a community.
I totally agree. It takes a village to build a village.
Exactly.
So it's the chicken and the egg, and that's part of the mastering of community that we're going to talk. We're going to have in the next 2 extra days after we have another
awesome.
Best Ilana Golan, which is a superstar that's now open.
She is a superstar.
She is. That's why we leave her for last. Last but not least, as we say, she founded. She was an executive in amazing startups, and again was drawn to Silicon Valley 15 years ago, or 17 or 16 years ago, to open Quali in the US. And since then, the Valley can't let her go. And she was an entrepreneur, and she was a venture capitalist, and she's still an entrepreneur. She's still a kind of a venture capitalist, and she's helping us and sponsoring us globally. Golan Ventures got it in over 300 articles. So we got like a lot of exposure thanks to Golan Ventures, and
she's amazing.
So and by the way, she founded Home Run, which is an amazing. You heard about Home Run?
Yes, of course.
So she's gonna maybe talk about that. We have the CEO of Home Run coming on tomorrow. So tomorrow we have roundtables, so you can meet face to face and have talks about your issues and discussions, cultivating community. And the last day, Thursday, we're going to have 13 master classes and a few breakout keynotes that's going to be about Mac. Did you hear about Commissar?
Oh, yes. I met the teams of Commissar. Yes. I really like what they're doing in terms of like general tool for communities.
So Mac is going to be as a closing keynote on Thursday from Commissar, the founder and CEO. And also, we're going to have Dr. Liraz Margalit. She used to be in the intelligence corps, and she's a behavioral science doctor, PhD, and she's going to explain how we understand things and how we manipulate and try to take it to a good place. And awesome. So look at our agenda.
Yes, Amir, I will.
Thank you so much for your time again.
Of course, thank you.
It's really appreciated. We'll continue talking, I hope, in the future, and we'll have a Vagio together in the near future.
Thank you for creating this. This is awesome. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Awesome, guys.